So different factors can affect situational awareness. You can have environmental. So if you're at an outdoor event, what's the weather like? You can have human factors. So have you had training before? Have you participated in a fire drill? Have you participated in any type of emergency drill? Have you had trainings like this? And have you been able to plan on your own? Maybe, at your house, do you have a plan in place if there was a fire? Do you have an area where you keep all your documents that you need to grab quickly? And another piece of it is if there's a bunch of other people around you. So say you're at a big concert or a big venue and alarms start going off and there's some type of emergency. Are you going to be able to respond as quickly if you were by yourself versus if there's 300 people plus around you, right? It's going to be impacted, by how others respond as well. And it may impact how we're able to respond and how quickly we're able to respond. Okay, so I like to give this example because I know not all of you may be in the field, but if you are in the field, especially when it comes to working for local government, we are the eyes for the city in a lot of situations. So determining on whether you want to contact someone or have a woman at a hotel and she was on the phone in the parking lot and it was a couple miles from downtown and she saw a group of men in riot gear with weapons that didn't have any type of emergency EMS or city name or any type of logo on the clothing, and they were piling into the back of a U-Haul. So she had two options in that moment. She could have completely ignored it and gone about her day, or notified someone because she had a weird feeling of what they were up to. So she ended up contacting emergency services, and they stopped the U-Haul from a little under a mile away from a big pride parade taking place downtown. And basically the people were going to do something bad and most likely hurt a lot of people. So this isn't to say that you always need to call law enforcement, but if you have a weird gut feeling, it's their job to respond and follow up with it, even if it ends up not being anything too bad or wasn't going to be anything catastrophic. This is how EMS and police and Department of Safety folks receive any of their information. It's from people like us, from local government, from city workers, from citizens that are providing this information to them, and then they're following up on it, doing the investigation piece. But they won't know unless they get that information from us, right? From people out in the field, from people observing it. I don't think we have enough time for the video today, but this is a TED Talk, and I can definitely share the link in the chat after this. But he does a good job at just giving us a first responder mindset, like it says in the title. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're camping or somewhere remote, or even downtown and there's a long wait on 911, which does happen in Denver and other places depending on staffing and whatnot. So are you going to be able to respond and act in that moment while you're waiting for others to assist? If we have that first responder mindset, then we're able to take control as much as we can and respond up to our abilities. So getting trained in CPR and first aid, getting trained on how to use AEDs, all examples of how we can better prepare to respond if we don't have any other options. Okay, so when do we become unaware? When we lose that situational awareness. So maybe we're running late, maybe we're super tired, maybe we're looking down at our phone like the woman in the photo. Being complacent is a big one. So how many times you've done something, how many times you may have interacted with someone or interacted with the store or like a gas station like you all interact with frequently. Being uncomfortable is a big one. So if you're in an uncomfortable situation, are you going to be aware of what's happening around you, or are you just worried about getting out and getting to a more comfortable space? So all possibilities of how we can lose situational awareness. Are there any others that you can think of and put in the chat that aren't outlined here?
Devin, I just want to make sure that the participants are seeing the slides. I see the slides. I did have one chat that said they're not seeing the slides. So if you're not seeing the slides, please let me know in the chat. Thank you, Michelle.
It's a me problem. Okay. All right, so I lost some focus. So it looks like everyone can see them. Can anyone think of other examples of when you lose situational awareness that isn't outlined here?
I think when you get lost, so like for the grantees, when they're going into neighborhoods they're not familiar with, part of being uncomfortable, but not knowing where you're going as well, looking for the entry door, things like that.
Yeah, or going to a place you've never been before, right? Maybe you're just listening to your Google Maps and you don't have a good sense of direction. Definitely part of it. Yep, staring down at your phone. Being on your phone is a big distraction for sure. Okay, we're gonna watch this video and see how well everyone does. It's like a little test. I know there's a couple people on here that are with DDPHE that have taken this training before, so don't give away any answers. We're gonna see if the volume works first. There's no sound yet, so just wait. Can you hear it? No. Okay. I'll try this again.
How many people in orange shirts get subs? Go. Seven people in orange shirts got subs. But what else did you see? Did you notice the ice cream truck change to a pizza truck? Did you notice the glasses? What about the man leaving the suspicious package next to the truck? Your next challenge? Be aware of your surroundings. If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
How'd everyone do? Not good. Obviously, it's not a super, super realistic situation, but it does give a perfect example of how when we're focused on one thing, we're focused on counting the subs, right? You don't notice what's happening around you because you're so focused on that. Yep, notice the bag, but not the glasses or the truck. Well, that's good. You notice the bag at least. There's plenty of other videos like that. But like I mentioned, just gives us a good example when we're focused on one thing, we're not really paying attention to what is happening around us. So when I was an inspector, and similar to you folks, if you go out in the field, if maybe you're issuing a ticket or you're writing someone up, you're focused on that person, maybe that person's agitated. If you're in like a store setting or if you're at a resident, are you noticing what's happening around you, what folks or patrons are doing around you, what they're holding, what they're next to? It's hard to focus on the conversation you're having, but also being mindful of where you're standing, where your exits are, and what else is taking place. Okay, so situation awareness and then merging into de-escalation, right? So we need that baseline situation awareness in order for us to help de-escalate when things get maybe hostile or elevated. So here's a list of all the reasons someone could be angry, right? And the list goes on, and there's not always a time where we're going to know exactly why someone's upset. But for a lot of it, in you all's case, and working for any type of local government, the person may feel wronged, right? Maybe they've been trying to get in touch with the city and they haven't been able to get in contact with the right person, or they haven't been able to get connected with the resources, so they feel like they're being wronged and they feel like they're not being heard. Stress response, anger is a big one. It's a very stressful environment out there right now, so a lot of people are stressed for different reasons, and that may mean that they can get angry and upset if you're trying to, talk with them or follow up with them. Past experiences are a big one, and then if someone is fearful or afraid, their response can be anger as well, because that maybe helped them get out of a situation they're not comfortable in the past. Okay, so this isn't really going to work since we're virtual, but I'll just give you an example of what I typically do in an in-person class, as I have people turn to each other, partner up, get in a group, and they say this phrase, "What are you doing here?" in 4 different tones. So a suspicious tone, a happy tone, a patronizing tone, and an irritable tone. And then I kind of get a feel of how their partners felt or responded depending on the tone. So tone plays a big piece in escalating or even de-escalating a situation. And sometimes tone matters, and majority of time tone matters more than what the words actually are, right? So how you're saying it and how it's coming across can throw someone off right away, and so they may not even be listening to the words you're actually saying. So outside of tone, sorry, the screaming part got cut off, but body language is a huge piece of escalation, right? So if someone is escalated, they may be making exaggerated or quick movements. They may be stomping their feet. They may be yelling or screaming, any type of clenched fists, or if they're any type of fighting stance. If someone was yelling and screaming and all of a sudden they become silent, that's a sign of escalation as well. Is there anything else that you can think of that I didn't cover that could be a sign of escalation?
I might say shaking.
Shaking. Yep, that's a good one. Okay, shaking, that's good. I know for teenagers, I've given this training to folks that work with youth, and they said texting on their phone really fast is a big one, not paying attention or looking them in the eyes. Faster talking, yep, definitely. Okay, so this is what I like to call the escalation peak. So in you all's role, we want to avoid someone getting to the peak, but then depending on the type of training you have, it's not always our job to get them de-escalated to recovery, right? That's when we would most likely need to call in for backup, whether that be mental health resources or the police. But we want to avoid getting someone to that peak by remaining calm and using our de-escalation skills to the best of our ability to try and avoid them to get to that top level, right? Which sometimes isn't possible, and it's not necessarily because of you or your training, it's just because of what the person's going through that day, and maybe you're just the straw that broke the camel's back, right? You're the final thing, they've had a really stressful day, a lot of things are piling up, and you gave them an answer they just did not want to hear, so they're at that peak level. So different techniques we can try. Like I mentioned before, body language is huge. So body language for the person that may be escalated, but also how you're presenting yourself, right? So how you're standing if you're in person. Can they see your hands? Are you in a neutral spot where you don't become a threat to them? They don't see you as a threat. So making sure you've got that neutral pose. You're not staring them right at the eyes, but in the eyes, but you're maybe a little bit off centered. You're not standing right in front of them with your arms crossed. So reading the situation, making sure your body language is neutral, using compassion and empathy, and if someone does become escalated, you're not expecting to resolve, and you're knowing when it's time for you to leave or get back to your vehicle or leave the store wherever you may be, and try and revisit another time, maybe with a coworker or maybe with police, depending on the situation. Does anyone have any examples of, it can be work or personal, of when you've been in a situation that may have been hostile or elevated, and if you were able to de-escalate or if you had to call in for any type of assistance?
Devin, when we show up to meet with our residents, sometimes if we're doing that in person, we're often meeting those folks at their peak because they've been trying to get someone to help them for so long. So it's very common. I experience a lot of times when I show up, the women want to hug me or they see me as a savior. So I love where you have on here, do not expect to resolve, because it's at that point where I usually say, like, I'm just here to talk to you. Like, we're showing up to hear them, right? Not necessarily to solve the issue at that time, but that love and understanding that they show you at first can quickly turn into hostility if you're not saying things they want to hear right away. So these are really good examples of how we might meet our residents.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share? I'm gonna butcher your name, so you'll have to say it on the mic. But they gave an example I was backed into once, and the woman refused to give her information. So you did have to call the police, right? So that's an example of there's probably nothing else that you could have done. Depending on, I don't know if you were in their residence, but I'm hoping that you had, when you're in their residence, you want to make sure that you have an egress out so that if they do get really agitated and they corner you, are you going to be able to get out of the house if you need to, if they pull a weapon or anything like that? So you always want to be between them and the door, right? Because if they block you, then you truly are stuck. And that's not to say that every situation is going to turn escalated, but just in case you have a route, an exit, if you start feeling uncomfortable. So thank you for sharing that. So like Peggy mentioned, I'll touch more onto that as well. I think the next slide covers that. No, that's personal space. I do cover in a couple slides how being transparent with what you're there for. So yeah, having your phone on you, definitely. Being transparent with what you're there for, knowing your role and knowing your goal, right? So explaining what you can do, being mindful of how you explain what you can't do. If there's a potential to still give people options or connect them with other resources, that's always a good thought, because what the last thing people want to hear if they've been trying to get connected is that, ooh, I can't help you with that, and I have no idea who can help you with that. Can you give them another phone number? Can you give them another contact, another resource where they at least have the control and the power to reach out, right? Okay, so personal space. I would just put this in there. Just be mindful of what makes you comfortable. Some people are close talkers, but it's okay to, ask them to give you some space, and vice versa. We'll skip the video as well just to give time for questions, and then I'll go over kind of the steps in detail on these next few slides. But ways we can help avoid escalated situations or de-escalate is always active listening. So if the person wants to be heard, hear them out. Even if it doesn't necessarily all apply for why you're there, they're usually going to be more receptive, you know, within reason after you hear them out for whatever it may be. Knowing your role and knowing your goal, like I mentioned, and making sure to recognize and acknowledge the emotions that they may be feeling. So validating the emotion by saying, I can totally understand, I can see why you're frustrated and upset with the situation you're in. Doing a summative reflection, which means that you're showing you're actively listening because you're kind of repeating a piece of what they've told you and asking them for more questions or details if it's not clear. So active listening, recognizing and acknowledging, always empathizing. This is an example of a summative reflection. You know, let me be sure I understand what you're saying. You're feeling really frustrated because you've tried calling X, Y, and Z and you haven't been able to get in contact with anyone until now. So don't guess, don't be afraid to ask, and explaining the why. Explaining the why is before someone may become escalated. If you start going down a big explanation and giving a lot of information and someone's already escalated, they're not going to be as receptive or even really able to hear you. So this is in the beginning stages. You're explaining why you're there, what you're able to provide them with, and then if you're able to connect them with other solutions or resources. So if you're not able to connect them with what they need, can you provide solutions or connect them with someone else? If it gets to the point where things become super escalated, you don't feel safe, it's okay to say, you know, if you're going to continue to speak to me in this manner, then I'm going to have to leave and we're going to have to reschedule. And you can leave it at that and just walk away. But just being transparent. If you're going to continue to yell and scream, you know, and treat me not respectfully, then I'm going to have to leave and I'm going to have to come back with a coworker or I'm going to have to reschedule whenever I'm available. And then, of course, if it becomes too unsafe, you don't have to give that explanation. You just need to leave right away and then maybe call for assistance or call the police, like the example they gave in the chat. Okay, so what not to do. Never make unattainable promises because those folks will remember it and they'll bring it up and they'll, you know, want to hold you to it, which makes sense. Don't ever threaten or challenge someone if they start attacking your ego or character. That's something that we just kind of let it slide, especially when someone's escalated, and we leave if we feel unsafe and let them know that we're going to have to come back a different time. Don't ever tell someone to calm down. That's going to make things much worse. Don't say, hey, buddy, calm down. It definitely will increase their anger and create a barrier between you two. Never lose your situational awareness. Can you remain in a vigilant position where you have an exit, or maybe you're standing outside so you feel like you're able to leave if things start to escalate? And also being mindful of you kind of know the situation you're walking into. Can you prepare ahead of time? Can you come with a colleague? Does it need to be solo? So kind of think through what you're there for and why, and if you think that there could be potential for things to go south. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind going off mute or putting in the chat, what's something we could say instead of calm down?
I usually say, I understand this is difficult and this is frustrating. Just empathize with them. I understand how you feel. This is difficult and frustrating.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna say validate their emotions just because nothing will like make you calm down if you don't feel like you're being heard. So if your emotions are validated, you're more likely to calm down than by someone just saying like, okay, calm down.
Exactly. So validating the emotion. I can see you're upset. I can see you're frustrated. I totally, you know, would see why you would feel frustrated in the situation you're in. Sometimes being careful with saying I understand, because if you haven't been in that situation, that person's going to know that or think that. And so they may say, Well, actually, you don't understand because you haven't been through the same situation I've been through. So just using your best judgment. What about I can't help you?
Basically just referring them to someone who can help them.
Right. So this isn't a service that we can provide, but here is a list of folks, or here is a resource that I can provide you with where they can assist you with what you may need.
Mhm. We have to say this a lot, Devin, because there aren't laws in place that we can engage to enact this type of movement from us that they want. So a lot of times we can't help them. And it's hard to say, I can't help you. But coming with, like Nikita says, a suggestion of, let's see what we can do instead of I can't help you.
What are some examples of what people typically ask of you that you are able to assist with, just so I can have an awareness?
Mm-hmm. Well, they ask us to, just make the housing provider stop the smoking, stop the exposure. So if they don't have a policy, there's nothing we can do, or it's not a law. The policy is not a law, so there's no regulation around it. So the only thing, we have very minimum things is like we can help you move. I can help you get out of your lease. We can talk to the housing provider and see if there's some mitigating things that we can do to help reduce the exposure. They're asking us to do something that there's no regulatory requirement for. It's a voluntary policy. So it's really just kind of compelling the housing provider to work with you. We can provide mediation. If you'd like to maybe make some understandings with your housing provider, perhaps we can arrange a mediation where we can talk with the housing provider about the situation.
Yeah, that's tough, but I feel like just even you listing all the options, at least there's some, right? And obviously there's going to be situations where you're like, there's literally nothing I can do, but you don't want to start with that. You want to say, these are the options we have. Yeah, you all are in a tough spot. Okay, we kind of covered all this. This is just like a quote I like to throw in, but everyone wants to be treated with dignity and respect, given options. Okay, so we'll touch on personal safety and then see if anyone has any questions, but these are just things to be mindful of, depending on where you work. If you're in a downtown setting, being mindful of what's happening around you, having headphones in. Maybe you can just put one headphone in so there's not a bunch of noise. You're able to be mindful. If you do go out in the field a lot, can you share your tentative itinerary with someone so they have an idea of where you could be? If it's addresses, I know when I was an inspector, I may not have stuck to my schedule, but at least had a list of addresses that I planned on going to that day. So if someone couldn't find me or couldn't hear from me, they'd have some idea where I could possibly potentially be. Practicing safety. So if you've been doing this for a long time, take a step back every now and then and see if you're being complacent with what situations you're putting yourself into and being mindful of, this feels a little bit unsafe to me. I think it's best for me to reschedule and not just thinking, oh, I have so much to do. I have so many people to get to, but taking the time to think ahead, using your best judgment. So someone mentioned always having your phone on you. If you're in a situation where you need to call 911, but you don't want to alert the person you're with or whoever you're around that you're calling, if you have an iPhone, you can click the power button 3 times or even hold the power button and the top volume down, and it'll give you the option to notify emergency services. Now, you need to go in your settings and make sure the alarm is turned off. Because if it's not turned off, then it will make a really loud buzzing, beeping noise when you call. But you can switch it to silent alarm so that it'll call silently. And then the same goes for an Android, but it's just the power button 5 times. or holding down the power and the top volume. But that's how you can notify 911 silently, depending on, what type of situation you're in. I think you all are in all different work settings, so this is just something I like to mention. If you're in an office setting, be mindful of who's around you. If you have a badging system, are people badging in? Don't leave the door open for unauthorized visitors. And if someone looks lost, you can always ask to assist them. If someone looks agitated, is there security that you can call to help escort that person out? When in doubt, add any emergency phone numbers to your phone so you don't have to mess with it if you are in an emergency, obviously anything under 911. But that is all that I had. If anyone has any questions, I've got my contact info here and I'll put it in the chat. Or you can connect with Peggy and she can connect with me. But any other questions or comments?
I was going to say something about verifying when you approach residents, verifying what they are comfortable with. Once you propose those solutions, if there's anything they aren't comfortable with, I've run into residents who got really angry if I talked to the housing provider or the manager before I asked them if it was okay. So to make sure that if you propose solutions, what is their comfort level for any of those solutions?
Yeah, that's a really good example. Like, are you able to discuss that with them over the phone or email or however you're communicating with them ahead of time to make sure you're on the same page? Anything else? All right, Peggy, that's all I had.
Will you be able to share your slides with the group?
Sure.
The presentation?
Yeah,
okay. I will upload that to Tobacco Free Colorado with the recording of this session. And you can feel free to stick around, Devin. I'm going to just open up some conversation here. But if you have to jump off, I absolutely understand. We thank you so much for bringing this to us. We don't like to throw the grantees out there into situations that they may not be ready for. Not everyone has been in the community doing work. And like I said earlier, community has definitely changed. Some of the things that Devin mentioned, all the things that Devin mentioned, also apply to telephone conversations. So most of us are having telephone conversations with the individuals that complain, and perhaps we don't meet them in person, but it's important to know safety as well in that situation. And I tell everyone, you need to use Google Voice when making these calls. You do not want an individual to have your personal phone number because they will call you at 4 a.m. and telling you that they're smoking right now. We don't know who we're talking to on the phone. We don't know who's complaining. I worked at a mental health facility as a tobacco cessation coach, and we would go out in public. I had their files. I could look to see if they were female aggressive or, what was going on with them. Some folks can seem absolutely safe on the phone and not be that way in person. So with our process, we need to determine how are we writing this into our process. Are we going to email our constituents only? Are we going to engage with them on a telephone call? Are we going to try to meet them where they're at, which is going to their property or meeting them out in the community? I do not suggest that you go to individuals' property alone. Devin mentioned going the buddy system. You may want to do this in a day where one or two of you can work together. But most certainly, if you're out in the public, you want to have on your email your location. As Devin said, the best to your ability. We're not working all day in public. So it's nice to have that location. Thank you, Devin. It's nice to have that location in your email on your schedule, so your supervisor or your coworkers know where you're going to be, and then check in with them after you've left, so they know, okay, they're in a safe situation. I am not giving you this presentation to scare anyone, but stuff does happen, and I want you to be prepared for it. When we get these calls, sometimes the individual has complained to Tobacco Free Colorado, and it's gone through the process, and it could be 30 days, maybe even 45 days before reaching out to them. So like I said, we're really meeting them at peak of agitation, and it's important to open up that conversation with, I'm here to get a better understanding what's going on. And as Pete mentioned as well, definitely before we're reaching out to the housing provider on their behalf, that we have approval from them to speak on their behalf, because you don't want to put their housing in peril because of their complaint. And, of course, we never mention their names when we talk to the housing provider, but we want to make sure that individual feels safe as well. And there's some other things, when we're engaging with our residents, it is important that we're very clear about what we can and can't do. I usually do this in the introductory email, like, is there a time that we can talk? And then just the kind of caveat, this is what we can and can't do. Not saying we can't help you, but saying this is our parameters of what we can do. There are certainly things that we can assist them with, but we can't make the smoke stop. We can't make the housing provider enforce their policy. We'll get into that in our fourth learning community call. What can we do for these individuals? But my suggestion to you, and I know we don't all work in teams, but try, if you're going to go out into these buildings, especially, if you're just going to talk to the housing provider, say you've gotten approval from the resident. Yeah, I want you to talk to our housing provider. And then you make an appointment to meet with the housing provider. That thing about badging in, they have security in their building. So you want to make sure if there's people standing around out in front that they don't come in behind you, that you keep their building safe as well when we enter it. I had one person when I got there, they wanted to copy my ID, my work ID, to confirm who I was. And, I almost handed it to them because we just do things kind of automatically. And then I'm like, wait a minute, no. And I said, no, I can't do that. And then they also invited like 4 or 5 other members of the community to come in. And then they'll go through the halls knocking on doors and try to get them to tell you their story as well. And, sometimes it gets out of control, and you just have to really realize, do I feel safe here? Is this being productive? And if it's not, then have an appointment. I always tell them when I get there, listen, decide how much time you have. I have 20 minutes, I have 15 minutes, and then I've got to go. Meet them in a common area instead of in their apartment. They're going to want to show you their apartment because they're going to want to have you smell it. And if that's the case, and that's something that you feel like you want to do or need to do, then of course go with a partner. So let me just open up to anybody that has any questions. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, if you want to have a deeper conversation about this, you can stay on and we can talk a little bit more. Does anyone have anything about their process or this going out in the community they have concerns with? Okay, hearing none. I want to make sure that you all add this into your process. When you're writing your process, how are we showing up? Are we emailing? If we go in person, how do we do that? Write it into your process so when you leave, this information isn't lost and doesn't travel with you in your head. I do believe that in-person engagement with the community is effective, And I believe that in-person engagement with housing providers can be productive as well. So if you have any questions about any more of that, just let me know. Please be on the lookout. I'm going to send out an email following this. We'll have a survey about the training, and we'll have a poll that I tried to launch earlier today. I will be uploading this recording in the next 2 to 3 days. And then I'll share Devin's slides as well if it's something that you want to share with the rest of your team that couldn't attend today. All right, hearing nothing, I'm going to say here have 4 minutes left in your day. And again, if you have a question, please stay on and I'll give you 5 minutes to answer. It's great seeing you, all of you today, and good luck out there.
Thanks, Peggy. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ashley. Michelle, are you still on?